Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is April 10th, 2024, and I am so happy to be bringing this author to you today. I connected with her publicist last year at the end of our season 2, but we were already completely booked, so we had to put it off until this year. And luckily, her publicist contacted me again when we started season 3. And while she didn't fit in with our Love Fest theme, I wanted to bring her to you as soon as we were able to do that. So please welcome somebody who I feel has written one of the most original and imaginative books in a long time. If you love family drama, if you love psychological stories, this is the book for you. But let's go ahead and bring on our guest and let you hear about this book from the author herself. Please welcome to Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart, your book talk podcast, Boo Trundle. I am so excited to have you here. I've been working with your publicist for quite a while, trying to negotiate the right time to get you on the show. So it's fabulous to have you here. Can you please tell our listeners who you are and what you do?
My name is Boo Trundle, and I am a writer. I'm also an artist, a visual artist, and my debut novel, The Daughtership, was published last June through Pantheon Books, and I am on the show to talk about the book and whatever else you want to talk about, but my goal is to just let people know about it and talk about how I wrote it and how much it's meant to me, and hopefully it'll mean something to you.
Now, beyond being like a visual artist and being a writer, you also have a career in music.
Many moons ago, yes, I did. In the 90s, I was a anti-folk artist, is what we called ourselves. I played acoustic guitar, but I was punk.
And you actually have a few
So
albums out.
I did. I made 3 records with a very small label in New York called Big Deal Records. They were distributed by Caroline Records, which if you were around in the 90s, you might have heard of it. But that was when indie music was a real thing, and it was really fun to be a part of. I lived in New York and I played gigs all over the place, and it was a really wonderful, social, creative, collaborative, beautiful way to spend your 20s. It was fun.
Did you write your own music?
I did. I wrote my own songs. I started playing the guitar in college, and I'm the kind of person that always wants to make stuff. I didn't like playing covers. I wanted to write my songs. So as soon as I knew 3 chords, I was writing songs. And then when I moved to New York, I just fell into the singer-songwriter scene, and I was very serious about it. I worked as a secretary and as a temp and doing odd jobs, and I pursued my music career pretty much that whole decade from 20 to 30. And then at 30, I packed up my guitar case and went to grad school.
What did you study in grad school?
Creative writing.
So you already had this trajectory going in your career from the beginning.
Certainly. At college, I was already writing fiction, and I just had some demons I needed to get out of my system, I think. I think music was very physical. I could do a lot of moaning and groaning, and I got a lot of anger out on the stage. In New York, a lot of people were doing performance art, and it was transgressive. It was chaotic. It was anarchic, and it just was right for me at the time in terms of what I was going through personally. And then, as I kind of got my act together in my late 20s, honestly, I wasn't as angry anymore, and I was a little more organized in my thinking. And at that point, I had more ambition to do something a little quieter and more grown up, I would say. Not that you can't be an awesome punk well into your 50s and 60s, but I think I wanted to contain my energy. So I started writing fiction.
So when did you first get the idea for this book?
Well, I have different answers for that question. Some of the book I started writing in the 90s. So there's just one section in the very beginning of the book that was a rewrite of an old manuscript that I had started way back when. And then other parts of it, I was still figuring out when we were going to press. So like, I would say if I had to give a specific, the birth of the idea came out of the writing, really. It wasn't like I thought, oh, I'm going to do this thing with a submarine and the subconscious, and I'm going to have these 3 little children on the submarine, and then I'm going to have it going parallel with this woman's story. Like, no, it all the idea sort of plopped onto it once it had all been written. I had to get it into some kind of structure and come up with that unifying idea. So really, it came after the book was written.
The whole concept of this is so original. Can you please explain it to our listeners? What is the topic of this book? Because it is incredible.
Thank you. Well, yeah, let me go back and try to do it in a more organized way because I just threw the structure out there. I kind of did it back to front. So basically, there's two main threads in the novel. The first thread follows Katherine, who's in her 40s, and on the surface, her life seems happy, content, successful, but her internal life is absolutely crumbling, and she's at war with herself, really. And that part of her is represented by a whole second plot line in the book that takes place on a rusted, old, defunct submarine, which is trapped at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. It's like an old U-boat from World War II, and it's on that ship are three girls. Well, actually, one's a boy, but they're rather gender fluid. They're three child representations of Katherine, her inner children, and they're trapped on this submarine. And so they represent parts of herself that she refuses to look at, things that happened to her as a child that she won't acknowledge, and truths that are eating away at her, begging to be acknowledged, and she just can't face it. And she's not a woman that hasn't tried. She has done therapy. She has tried to work on her stuff, but she just hasn't had the courage to really go down and save those parts of herself. And they're dying. They're dying because they're being suffocated in the submarine. So the machine that runs the plot is Catherine going to be able to save these kids, and the only way to save them is to face herself. For anyone who has gone through any kind of internal warfare, it's quite the drama.
Well, and I love the whole image of them being trapped in the submarine, that they are submerged within her, but within the ocean. I mean, the visual aspect of this is just fantastic.
It was very fun. I did a lot of research. I watched, there's a movie called Das Boot, which is a
Hmm.
1980s film where the whole film takes place on a submarine. So I watched that. I watched that so many times it actually got stuck in my old computer. It's still there. I had it from Netflix. They don't even rent DVDs anymore, but it's still in my computer upstairs. I couldn't get it out. I think that's almost symbolic. And I
Hmm.
read the book Das Boot, and I toured a submarine up in Connecticut. And, I really tried to capture the suffocation, the claustrophobia. And also, there's something kind of cool about it. Just living in like a little inner world. It's very safe. It's very isolated. They were very protected. And that's part of the danger, that these parts don't really want to be discovered. They don't really want to surface to the top of the ocean because then they could get bombed. They could get discovered. They could get attacked. So there's a safety in being hidden, but it was not working for Katherine in her day-to-day life.
How did you actually come about to this full storyline? I mean, do you have any interesting writing techniques that help you bring this all together?
Let me see. The question is, how did I come about coming up with the submarine or the structure, the way the two things intertwine?
Well, the whole storyline is just so original. I mean, it seems like there's tons of things on the market today that are just retellings of stories before, but this one is so original. I was just kind of curious as to how you actually brought this all together. What kind of writing techniques do you use to help spur your creativity?
So it's interesting because when I was working on this book, I was doing a lot of generative workshops. And I always say I'm 56 and I've been trying to get a book published for 30 years. It's never like I didn't think I was a good writer. I've always been told I was a good writer, but there was something slightly dead or stilted or predictable, or it was just like everything else.
Hmm.
It just was whatever I was writing wasn't unique enough to get the attention of an editor or to get published. And then, yes, this book, I was actually taking poetry and memoir workshops while I was writing this novel. So I was sort of a spy because I was a fiction writer masquerading as a poet, or a fiction
Hmm.
writer masquerading as a memoir writer. And I would sneak into these workshops and I learned some techniques from these other genres. Like, for example, one of the techniques in memoir is to consult your own archives. Go back, look at your family photos, look at your old diaries,
Hmm.
anything really, birth certificates, newspaper articles. I did all of that. And that really opened up my story quite a bit. One of my great great grandparents had his letters were published. So I went back and looked at his letters, and he was a soldier in the Civil War. So
Oh, wow.
that brought in this whole element of ancestors and the shame in my bloodline because he was a Confederate soldier, and shame is one of the topics of the book. So that opened up that whole realm. I also found this old story I wrote when I was in third grade, and it was about a giant who lives in a submarine in a river on top of a mountain. That's where the whole submarine thing came from. So, like, it was this old story that I'd written, and I brought it out and I Xeroxed it, I cut it up, I started using pieces of it. And then I started researching other ways that submarines were affected my life. Like, I grew up in a naval town. And also, like, I remember my dad took me to see Das Boot, like, on a rainy Sunday when I was in like seventh grade. And so there was like a family memory there. So, these archival documents open up all kinds of doorways in your imagination and also in your memory.
Hmm.
And that is just one example of how I used these sort of spying on other genres like memoir or poetry or even historical writing, doing research to feel liberated almost to write my novel in a completely different way.
That is just so incredible that you're bringing so much of yourself into this.
Oh yeah, my whole self, my whole self. My writing process is a whole self game, and it's worse now because I feel like I discovered this technique writing the daughtership, and now I'm working on a new novel, and I'm in this period right now where I'm trying to figure out how to integrate all the different things that I'm trying to say in the book. Because if the daughtership is about reclaiming your childhood, then this new novel is about getting to know your emotions and being in your body. So I'm trying to do that as a novel. Like, I think that like my goal is somewhat, I made up a genre for the way I write called Spirit Lit, which means spiritual literature, where I'm a psychology geek. That's what someone called me in a recent podcast, a psychology geek. Like, I am fascinated by psychology. I'm fascinated by philosophy. I'm fascinated by what are we doing here? How do we stay here? Why is it so hard to be a human? And
Mhm.
that's what I write about as fiction, but I definitely put my whole struggle as a person into my writing.
Sometimes I think if you can get past your own hangups and you can kind of bare your own soul whenever you're writing, it actually makes for more relatable work. That there are going to be people that are like, oh my God, yes, somebody understands what I'm going through. When you kind of hold everything back because you're afraid of judgment and criticism, it tends to be more of a surface read. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I basically feel, though, that there are people are looking for different things in the books that they read.
Hmm.
And some people are looking for a sort of third person distant, a writer who's got a pipe and a little beret and a tweed jacket and is very removed from the mystery that they're unspooling. And some people want to just get right into the blood and guts. My best friend from childhood, she loves reading the messiest memoirs that she can find. She just wants to know all of it. And she came to my book launch and asked some really personal questions. So she's just like, and she already knew the answer because she's
Yeah.
my friend, but that's what she wants. So she wants the blood and the guts. So I think every reader's different in the same way that every writer's different. But for me, like, I had to really set myself free to get published. I've written other novels, but I've never gotten published. So I really had to let go and just write wild. And that's how I got this book published.
How long did it take you to get a publishing deal for this?
Well, 30 years really, because I started I started trying to get my first novel published in 93, but this book specifically went pretty fast, because like I said, some key went into some lock at some point in the writing of the daughtership, and I just hit my stride. So I feel grateful for that. And also I feel nervous about it because now I'm trying to keep it going for another novel. And there's some kind of a magical alchemy that I found. I hope I still have it. I think even if I only ever published the daughtership, I would be very, very proud. And it's kind of like, how they'll have like a TV show like Seinfeld or something, and they're like, how
Hmm.
many seasons should we do, before we lose the magic? It's
Yeah.
just like there's kind of a magic to a novel that's really clicking and working. And it's not always easy to make a novel sing. So I'm very proud of the daughtership. I really do think it works. And once my agent started sending it out, it wasn't long before we sold it. So it took a long time to get it there, like my whole lifetime, really.
Yeah.
Like I kind of had to become the person that I became who was willing to really bare my soul that way. That took a long time.
Yeah, that I understand.
Yes, you kind of have to become the person that can do the writing, then you have to do the writing. And then you have to find the right editor. So it is very magical. It's very alchemical. It's a very rare. I feel really lucky.
Well, I can tell that your publicist definitely believes in you and your book because whenever she had first contacted me, it was whenever I was just finishing up season 2 of this podcast, and I had already booked everybody for the rest of that season. I was trying to hurry up and get it all done. And I was like, yes, I want to talk to her, but I'm already done for the season. Can we hold her for season 3? And she kept in contact with me regularly, not so often that it was pushy, but just so often to remind me, don't forget about her. And I was like, no, no, we're not going to forget about her. Whenever I started doing the interviews for season 3, I'm like, okay, we got to find a time. Let's do this.
I'm so glad. I mean, it's hard. So many books come out, and it's been a brutal awakening for me, honestly. My book came out in June, and I've been wanting to publish a book my whole adult life. So, on one level, my dreams are coming true.
Hmm.
The book was in Barnes and Noble, and I was getting all these photographs from all over the country of friends like, oh, we saw your book here, we saw your book there. But I didn't know how to get the word out so much about the book. And even when you're on a major publisher, you do kind of need to publicize yourself and really hustle. And it sounds like my publicist has more hustle than I do, which is the way it should be. That is the way it should be. But I don't, I have a little bit of like a hustle problem. So I'm learning, but it's been really challenging because you, of course, have a fantasy that everybody's going to read your book. And I'm not bragging about this, but I have gotten amazing feedback from the people who have read my book, and I just want more people to read it. So that's why I'm doing the podcast.
Well, and I just really liked, what was it they said on Kirkus Reviews? A wildly strange reading experience that disorients and exhilarates in equal measure. Whenever I read that, I'm like, oh my God, that's saying something.
I know that was the first review I got, and I was like dancing around my house. But
Oh,
then,
yeah.
I didn't really get a lot of reviews. So that was disappointing because I feel the book is not only has literary value, some of the people who have read it have really said it has affected them deeply and changed them. And so really just out of not selfishly, I just really want to see the book, people talking about it and reviewing it. And but that's all part of the hustle. Right? Because you're a writer.
Oh my God. Marketing is the worst. And I actually worked in advertising and design for years.
Hmm.
And it's still like the bane of my existence as a writer. The marketing is like the worst part, even for me.
Well, do you have any tips or secrets, or have you had any unexpected surprises in the marketing of your books?
Actually, my first set of books, I really didn't market because I
Uh-huh.
looked at them as just a practice to try and figure out how to do self-publishing. And I was doing it under a pen name under Stephen Burkhart. So that was a guy's name and I'm a girl.
Yes, your
So
male, your alter ego, male alter
yeah.
ego.
So I really never publicized those, but I've already started the marketing on the memoir that I'm writing now.
Hmm.
And I've got like this whole plan of what's going to happen for the next 6 months before I publish. So it's a very different process this time around.
Right, you learn. That's how I feel too. I feel like I learned so much in the last 9 months, well, really the last year, because the marketing and the publicity started before the book comes out. I
Hmm.
don't think I would do anything differently because I did everything to my absolute limit and to my absolute edge, but I would know how to do it differently and I would know how to do it better if, next time around, So you learn as you go along. And I think also, one thing I've learned too is that, part of the marketing is in the writing. Like part of
Oh, yeah.
marketing is like when you start a book, you decide what kind of audience you want and how many books you want to sell. And if you really want to sell a whole lot of books, and you write a book that's going to sell.
How hard was this to come up with a cohesive storyline when you have so many unreliable characters in the text?
Well, it sort of depends on what you think of as cohesive. This is something I've thought about a lot since the book came out. And also, like I said, I'm writing a new novel, and I would like for it to be a companion to the first, not in terms of plot and character, but I'd love it if you would pick up a book by me and say, oh, this is a novel by Boo Trundle. Like once you've read The Daughtership, and then my new book's called The Emotional Future. If you read that, you say, oh, it's different from The Daughtership, but you could tell it's written by the same person.
Hmm.
And part of the magic of that, or the pull of that for me, is to find a way to make the reader turn the pages without depending on a predictable beginning, middle, end plot structure. It's just not my thing. I saw this friend at the grocery store with her husband, and he was like, Liz couldn't put your book down. She started reading and she would not put it down. And she never does that. He said she hates reading, she wouldn't put it down. And that's like the best thing that could happen to me as a
Oh,
writer.
yeah.
To be told that someone couldn't put my book down, and then to be told that that's not the kind of reader she normally is. So that's my reader right there, my ideal reader, as they say. So yeah, in terms of a cohesive structure, I think the thing that's keeping the pages turning is you want to find out if Catherine's going to be okay. First of all, you don't know what's going on. So like for the first 25 pages, I think you don't even know what's going on. I mean, I've also had the opposite experience where someone was like, I tried to read your book like 3 times and I keep putting it down. And I just said to that person, first of all, why did you tell me that? Like, next time, do not tell a writer that you can't read
Yeah.
their book. And then I said, just you have to let it be what it is, and you'll find out what's going on. So that's the other thing, is the curiosity of like, who are these people, and why are they telling opposite stories, and like whose story is true, and what's going to happen at the end of this. So there's that as well. But you do have to put a bit of faith in me and the process, that it's going to all make sense in the end. So there is a bit of chaos that turns into order. And that to me is a fun ride. But I like being challenged by my stories. My kids always give me a hard time because a lot of times we'll go to movies and I'm just bored after 20 minutes because I know what's going to happen. I like to be treated as a very smart person by a book or a movie. I want the movie to treat me like someone who can handle a bit of a challenge. And that's what my book does.
I would assume with such a complex storyline, you would have to be a very good plotter.
Oh, not at all.
Really?
No. Nope. No. Do you remember that movie, A Beautiful Mind?
Oh, yeah.
Where Russell Crowe plays a mathematician?
Hmm.
He's not taking his medication, and his wife stumbles into his shed, and he's got notes all over every single surface, and there's note cards everywhere and scraps of paper. Like, that's what my dining room looked like when I was writing this book. I would put it all together, tear it all apart, put it all together, tear it all apart, and draw all different kinds of ideas for what kind of plot it would have. There's a review, actually, a really wonderful writer and reader named Liz Matthews wrote a review of my book for the Atticus Review. It's online, and she introduced me to a book that I hadn't heard of about plot structure, that talks about, and I can't remember the name of the person who wrote it, but it talks about there's all different kinds of plots, like spiraling plots and plots that are like diamond shapes, vortexes, like explosions,
Yeah.
apocalypses. So we're all pretty much used to one plot, which is beginning, middle, end, and often the hero's journey, where there's one character who faces a challenge, comes against many obstacles, and then succeeds in the end. I mean, you could say that is the plot of the Daughtership, but there's a lot going on around it. But there's a lot of different ways to plot a story. I would just say that 99.9% of stories that we read are the hero's journey, really. So
Yeah.
I think it's time for all of us to let go a little bit and let ourselves experience other ways of being pulled through a story. And that is one of my goals. I really want to do new stuff. I've never wanted to do things the way other people do it. I always want to do things different, unique, and new. Otherwise, what's the point? That's how
Yeah.
I feel. I have to feel like I'm a wildly one-of-a-kind genius in order to get myself to even work on my stuff. I have to write my novels, like on the back of a menu, in the back of a pickup truck, being kidnapped, driving, I mean, I gotta feel like I'm the only one that could ever do this, just to trick myself into working on it. Otherwise, I think I would give up. So
I love that though.
some kind of like problem that I have. It's just hard to keep going, especially in a world where art and writing are not always recognized by the people around you as a legitimate life ambition.
Yeah, definitely.
So madcap genius, you have to kind of work that brand in order to be accepted amongst your family and friends. So I'm really glad I finally published a book.
Have your family all read your book?
They have, yeah.
Did you get good reviews from the family?
Yes and no. I mean, yeah, my sister was reading it. She read it when it was in Galley, so she was one of the first people to read it. And she was sending me sort of blow by blow, page by page, little text like, this is funny. And like, oh my God. And that was really nerve-wracking. But ultimately, she thought it was really funny. And she gets that it's a, work of art. I really do see this book as a work of art. It's trying to be something totally one-off, one of a kind. And she really got that and was very validating about it. And my brother is always super supportive of me as an artist, but I think that, my book is fairly autobiographical, and people have different ways of coping with childhood stuff. And, I
Hmm.
just don't think my brother wanted to open up every can of worms that I opened up. I mean, I opened
Yeah.
up every can of worms
Yeah.
and then left them open and the worms were crawling all over the place. So I think, he read it, but I think he was like, that's great. And thanks a lot, and
Yeah.
now I need to go back and live my life. But my healing journey as a person has always been quite open. I've always included my friends and family. I've never been a secretive, sort of private person. For me, that's really important because
Hmm.
a lot of people are suffering. A lot of people have things that they are ashamed of, things that either happened to them when they were kids or things that they have done themselves, whether it's like being in an addiction or even just making a mistake or getting divorced. There's so many things that we can feel shame about. And I am a big believer in honesty and openness because I think we're all in this together. And if I do have a gift, it's that I'm a high revealer. I'm not afraid to talk, not afraid to write, not afraid to lay it out there. And also, I've spent my whole life collecting a toolbox so that I can do that in a way that hopefully is universal, powerful, inclusive, potent. And that's my gift. And I don't want to hide it under, a bushel, as they say. So I can't really spare my family's feelings and ultimately think that telling your own personal truth, the more you can do that, the more it becomes a universal truth and you can help people. I don't know if that's my primary goal. I'm not a saint or anything. I'm just a madcap genius. Listen to me. I'm not calling myself a genius. Yeah, well, why not? Nobody else is going to do it. But you know what I'm saying? I don't know what my job is here, but I've always been compelled to get up on a stage and belt it out and blurt it out. And that's what I'm doing.
That's fantastic, though. I think more people need to do that.
I don't think everyone's cut out for it.
Oh, no,
you know?
definitely not.
But if you are cut out for it, I think you have to do it. And then you have to let the chips fall where they fall and in every single way. Even I have two kids, and my kids are teenagers. I asked them not to read the book, and that wasn't such a big ask. They don't want to read it anyway. To ask a teenager not to read a book is like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, if you insist, mom, so they haven't read it, but I had to ask my ex-husband not to read the book. I don't know if he's read it or not, but I said something like, it could hurt you, and why read something that might hurt you? I just think when you're an artist, you kind of see yourself sort of as like a pioneer or some kind of fringe. You have
Hmm.
to see yourself as sort of on the outskirts of regular life and be willing to take huge risks and also suffer the consequences.
Yeah. I actually had a long conversation with my husband before I started my memoir because there are things that happened during the year that I had my brain surgeries that other people might be very uncomfortable hearing about. And it's like, I'm just going to let you know that I want to do this. I've wanted to do this for years, but this may, bother you that I'm going to be revealing this kind of information about myself. And ultimately, he finally just said, do what you got to do.
Well, I think he's a wise man
Yeah.
and a generous man. And there is a humility in letting a story go out into the world.
Hmm.
And there's a generosity to it.
Yeah.
Because you'll be able to help someone else with your story. And if you kept it to yourself, that other person who might have gone through the same things will never know they're not alone.
Exactly. That was my whole point about all of it. And he really took that to heart and he was like, yeah, okay.
After my book came out, I talked to my ex-husband's best friend and he read the book. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So I said to him, what do you think? Do you think that if my ex-husband read it, he would be hurt or upset or mad or anything? And his friend said, the book is so centered on the main character, Katherine, and everything is so firmly and almost viciously told from her point of view to the point
Mhm.
where you're like, oh my God, this poor woman, her brain, the way it works, that her descriptions of her ex-husband they're not reliable. There's so many unreliable narrators. So, he said, I don't think that it would bother your ex-husband because really it's a book about her inner torment and her inability to see straight and to like make sense of things. And so if the ex-husband gets thrown under the bus a couple times, it doesn't really reflect badly on the ex-husband. It's really
Yeah.
just a reflection of the chaos of her internal systems. So I guess that was somewhat comforting.
So now this is the point of the show that we like to do 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick, but we just absolutely refuse to give up on the bit because it's fun. Are you ready?
Okay, sure. I guess we'll see.
Question 1. Boo is such an original first name. Is it short for something?
It's short for Elizabeth, which is not that interesting, but yes, it is short for Elizabeth.
How do you
Boo
get
is
Boo?
way better.
How do you get Boo from Elizabeth, though?
I was named after my grandmother, and she had a bunch of siblings. She was one of eight, and she was the second oldest. And so they couldn't pronounce her name. And so they would
Mhm.
just say Elizabeth. And then it got shortened to
Ah,
Boo. And then it just got passed down. And I'm from the South, and everyone in the South has dumb nicknames. It's quite acceptable down there. It's not quite as acceptable up here where I live, but in New Jersey, people give me very funny looks when I tell them my name. But down there, everybody's like Moo, Boo, Foo, Muffin, Hoobie. Everybody has weird names.
see, but that's cool. I like that story, though.
So.
So now, question two. What is your favorite part about writing a book or releasing an album?
Oh, my favorite part about writing a book or releasing an album is just the creative process, just getting lost in something, making something out of nothing. That is the greatest joy of my life. Just coming up with an idea, letting the idea grow, and then the idea takes over, and I'm no longer in charge and being sort of the servant of an idea, and then the idea is finished and it's either an album or a book. That is a wonderful journey.
Yeah, I get that.
Hmm.
So now, question three. Which came easier to you, writing music or your book?
I think that writing music came easier in the sense that I was just living and breathing the musical process. When you're in production, you lock yourself in a record studio, in a recording studio, you have other musicians around, you work 15 hours a day, and it almost just makes itself. And then when you're finished, you have regrets. Of
Mhm.
course, you think, oh, I wish the vocals were louder, or we should have had a different drum sound, but it's done. You kind of have a time limit put on you by your recording budget and by the time you've rented out the studio. And so it's finished. Whereas with a book, like you could rewrite and rewrite and rewrite, it's nice to have the book out there because now it really is finished. But I just
Yeah.
think that having a time limit and a deadline imposed on me from the outside just by my recording budget made making music easier.
Question four. With your background in music, do you listen to music while you write or do you need it to be quiet?
I listen to bizarre ambient music when I write. I don't like it to be quiet necessarily, but there's this whole like part of Spotify that's megahertz based, and so you can just listen to different frequencies. That's what I listen to. Just very ambient, tonal. But I do like to have some kind of noise, but there cannot be any lyrics. I will
Yeah.
immediately lose my place.
Yeah. Same here. It's like a lot of times I'll listen to jazz, but it has to be like just piano music or something. It cannot have any lyrics.
Right. I like to have a companion. Yeah. I think of music as a companion. It's very lonely at the computer. What a lonely life being a writer. Oops, I should have thought about that, but it's too late now.
Now, question five. I know when I get into writing, I will just get so lost, have no concept of time. I'll look up and it's like 4 hours later and have not gotten up out of this chair. Do you do the same thing or are you more aware while you write?
I do the same thing. When I first started making art and writing and making music, I think I was really doing it just to kill time. I felt so oppressed. It's hard to even imagine now, but when I was in my 20s, I just felt almost oppressed by all the time of life. And now that I'm older, there seems to be no time. My experience of time has changed, but I do think that is the gift and profound beauty of writing, but it's also the gift and profound beauty of reading. Like when you pick
Mhm.
up a book and then 4 hours go by and you look up. I mean, I'm in that right now. I'm reading a book I really like, and 2 days go by and you're like, what happened to those 2 days? I was
Yeah.
curled up reading a book, like, so that's what I love about books. And they transport you, they take you out of your own reality. It sounds to me that's what you do as well when you're writing. You're in the Wild West or wherever you
Oh,
are, but you
yeah.
leave this reality. So it's not just time, it's also space.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I get very lost. And whenever I'm reading a book that I'm really into, I get so mad if somebody interrupts me because it's like the whole movie is just playing in my head and I am immersed in that world. And whenever somebody
Mm-hmm.
interrupts me, they're yanking me back out of that world. And that is so harsh.
Mm-hmm. And then when it's over, you miss them, you miss the characters, you miss the place.
Hmm.
Really, as we're talking about it, I feel quite lucky to be a writer and to be able to do this with my life.
Oh, yeah.
It's a real service to others because we need to be transported. I mean, give me a break. Life is hard.
Is there anything that you want our listeners to know that we have not covered today?
Well, if you're interested in the book or interested in me, you can find my Instagram page. It's under Boo Trundle on Instagram. And I have a TikTok as well. And I do make a lot of videos about my process and not just my writing, but my visual art. And I also have a Spotify page where you can find this podcast and other podcasts. And you just Google my name, you find my website. I really am hoping you'll read The Daughtership and also pass it along to your friends. And it's a psychologically satisfying and entertaining piece of fiction.
And all of the information that you just mentioned will be in the description of the podcast with live links so that everybody can just click and go and find all of your information very easily. And you will be in the April-May issue of Book Banter magazine as well.
Oh, great. I didn't know you had a magazine.
Oh, yeah. I have a companion magazine called Book Banter Magazine. For people who don't like to listen to podcasts, they can find the information that way.
That is great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming and doing this today. I have been looking forward to this since last year. I'm glad we were able to finally get it scheduled.
Since my publicist was in your ear.
Yes, definitely need to send her a thank you because
I'll
this is
send
just
her
fabulous.
some flowers. Thank you so much, Dianne.
So there you have it, folks, my interview with the incredible Boo Trundle. Be sure to go check out her book, The Daughtership. You can find all of her information in the description of today's podcast. And of course, be sure to pick up your copy of our April-May issue of Book Banter magazine. You can find it at our website, burkhartbooks.com. You can buy it directly from our website. For just $2.99, you get all of the authors that will be coming up in the next 2 months with links to their social media and buy links to all of their books. Now, next week, we have a writing team coming on. For the first time, I am interviewing both members of the writing team together. They write as A.J. Landau, and they have written the incredible thriller, Leave No Trace. I keep reading it every night before going to bed, and I keep losing sleep trying to stay up to finish at least one more chapter. It is so good. It is a national parks thriller, and one of the cool things that they do with this book is the beginning of every chapter has an interesting fact about our national parks. The action keeps you on the edge of your seat. It's not only entertaining, you also learn a little bit about American history, and in a very fun way. Now, after the writing team who write as A.J. Landau, we will have Nandita Godbole. Oh my goodness, she has got some of the most incredible cookbooks. I love her slogan where she says that she can teach you how to make Indian food with confidence, no stress. I've cooked Indian food several times. I have never managed to do it with confidence. So hopefully her cookbooks and her advice are going to be able to help me with that. So that will round us out for the rest of our shows in April. Next month, we're going to have even more fantastic authors. So keep coming back, and don't forget, I will be giving more updates on my own current work in progress, Free Bad Haircut with Each Craniotomy, my medical memoir where I talk about the incredible year that I spent going through 7 surgeries in 6 months, and 6 of those are brain surgeries. It was a very interesting year. But I think that is enough for us for today, folks. I don't want to keep you too long, so it is that time for you all to go forth and be very happy.